Hello and welcome to another 9-minute Bible study. Our starting point, 2 Chronicles 31, verse 2. Let's read the verse. And Hezekiah appointed the courses of the priests and the Levites after their courses, every man according to his service, the priests and the Levites for burnt offerings and for peace offerings, to minister and to give thanks, and to praise in the gates of the tents of the Lord. What do we see here? We see the beginning of what would be the full-time service of the priests and the Levites in the temple. The Lord wanted this to be a full-time, people support the ministry type of position. Hezekiah, realizing what happened in the reign of his father, that the people dropped the ball and did not support the ministry at all, restores the ministry to its proper service. The priests, they were the ones who offered the offerings, burnt offering, peace offering. They ministered, they gave thanks. This was something that they were called to do. In our time, we are referring to the fivefold ministry: the apostle, the prophet, the evangelist, the pastor, the teacher. They have been called to be in full-time service, supported by the ministry and the people in the church. We also see here the Levites. We need to see in our time those who are in service to the Lord also taken care of on a full-time basis. A church, for example, should not contract out things like lawn service. It should not contract out their media ministry or anything like this. The Lord should raise up a group inside the church to do these jobs, to do these tasks. Musicians should come from the church. All of this should be in-house. And yes, the time will come as the Lord expands the ministry of the church that all of these ministries are taken care of by the congregation. The Lord has called the congregation to give to Him, then the Lord will give to His ministers and His servants, so they could dedicate their lives to the ministry of the Lord. When a minister is dedicated to the Lord, when he is in full-time ministry and service, he can devote his whole time, his whole effort to the ministry, and everyone will be benefited in the long run. Verse 3. He appointed also the king's portion of his substance for the burnt offerings, to wit, for the morning and evening burnt offerings, and the burnt offerings for the Sabbaths, for the new moon, and for the set feasts, as it is written in the law of the Lord. Verse 4. Moreover, he commanded the people that dwelt in Jerusalem to give the portion of the priests and the Levites, that they might be encouraged in the law of the Lord. First, in verse 3, King Hezekiah, he provided the beginning of what would be the ministry in Jerusalem. He provided the early offering. In the church age, this is Jesus openly supporting his church. But how does Jesus do this? At first, yes, miraculous money coming in, because the Lord wants his ministry off to a good start. But in verse 4, what do we see? The people in Jerusalem giving their portion to the priest and the Levites, meaning that the congregation began to support the ministry financially and through their basic needs. There's two types of giving that we will see. One, financial. Two, substance. Understand something about 2 Chronicles. In Bible days, A lot of time the currency was food. They were actually told to tithe things like the crop, things like the harvest of the animals, things of that sort. That was really the currency of the time. They didn't run out to the local grocery store and buy groceries. The congregation gave of their crops, of their harvest, and brought in all of this to the people. Now, I want us to think about all the blessings of the Lord in our lives in terms of a harvest. God has given into your life. You are harvesting the blessings, be it financial, be it whatever blessing the Lord brings. The call is to give that portion to the Lord, and then the Lord will give it to his ministry for service. We see this more in verse 5. And as soon as the command came abroad outside the city of Jerusalem, the children of Israel brought in abundance the first fruit of corn, wine, and oil, and honey, and all the increase of the field, the second part. And the tithe of all things brought they in abundantly. We discussed the tithe thoroughly in the prior two lessons, so I'm not going to get into that thoroughly beyond saying this. We know through the example of Abraham that we are to tithe to our king and priest. Our king and priest is who? Jesus. And when we tithe to our king and priest, Jesus will give that to his ministers for the support of their ministry. Now, we also see the concept of first fruits. The first portion of what was harvested was brought in to the priest. There was a feast of first fruits that was part of what was the Passover ceremony. This is vitally important to understand. The first was brought in to the Lord. It was something that the law required, from the firstborn to all of the first part of the harvest and the crop. Why? Because the Lord wanted the ministry supported. He did not want his priests and Levites begging for bread at the local corner, saying, "We'll priest for food." He wanted the people to take care of them. The two ways was the first fruit. When you are blessed of the Lord, yes, the concept of first fruit, to give the first to the Lord, is vitally important. Then the tithe, the monthly support of the ministry, that the ministry will be a blessing to you. And we'll pick up with this in our next lesson.